So how should we think about investment fees? And here I particularly mean fees that we're going to pay a financial advisor, and specifically fees to help us manage our investments. Now, longtime viewers know that I'm a do-it-yourself investor, but I get it. Some folks want others to manage their investments for them. There are fees that are charged. Sometimes it's hourly, sometimes it's a flat fee or a subscription fee. But the primary way advisors charge fees is called assets under management. They usually charge a percentage of the amount of the investments they're managing for a client. And I would say the industry standard is 1%, but sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. How should we think about those fees and how they affect our wealth, our finances, our retirement? Now, why is this coming up now? Well, let me show you. There is an article that was published on kitces.com, Kitces. I've had Michael on the show in the past. I think this is an excellent source of information. It's focused primarily for advisors, but there's just a wealth of information on his site. And it was this particular article, quantifying more accurately the real impact of a financial advisor's costs on their clients' nest eggs. And this particular article was written by Derek Tharp. I don't know Derek, but he's written a lot on the Kitces website, and I think he does great work. Although, as you'll see, for this article, I think he and I are going to have to agree to disagree. So what prompted this article? Well, Ramit Sethi, who is, I guess, a financial influencer, he's wrote a book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. Maybe many of you have read his book. And he had posted a tweet. Let me show you. Here it is. And by the way, I'll link to all of this below the video, where he sort of does the math. And by the way, we've done this many times on this show. But the effect of a 1% AUM, assets under management fee, on someone over a 30-year period, and he had a bunch of assumptions in here. They all seemed, more or less fine to me. And he showed the cost. It ended up this 1% fee if you factor in the lost compounding, because it's coming out of your portfolio, ended up costing you about $380,000. Total loss of 28% of your returns. And so that was the subject of this article. And so what did Mr. Tharp say about it? Well, he made a number of arguments. There's sort of three that I want to address. I think the three key arguments. And the first was, he said, look, it's unfair to take an advisor's fee and then compound it over time. We don't do that. We go to the grocery store, you buy groceries, you don't do that. You buy diapers, which is actually an example he used. And he noted it was kind of a silly example. But, when you buy diapers for your newborn, you're probably not breaking out a calculator and calculating the lost compounding effects. Although some of you probably are, and you should admit it, but most folks probably aren't. Fair enough. Why should we do that with investment fees? He also says the analysis sort of ignores all the value that advisors bring and the different ways they help clients, whether it's keeping them in the market during volatile times, helping them with tax planning, financial planning, and so on. And fair enough. And then he made a third argument. He said, look, a lot of folks, and by the way, this would apply to me too, really suggest other types of fee arrangements, one of them being a flat fee. And he used as an example Facet Wealth. I talked about Facet Wealth on the show not long ago. He said they have different flat fee models. One's $2,000 a year. That's their least expensive. The most expensive is $6,000. He noted that they are a sponsor of Ramit's. So I think that's why he used that example. And he said, look, if you do the math, those flat fees end up taking away from the nest egg as much, or in some cases, a lot more than AUM fees. So that was basically his article, and it gave us an opportunity to sort of dig into this and try to understand how we should see fees. Now, I will tell you, and I'll link to this, I wrote an article, published it yesterday, here it is, with my response to Ramit's tweet and Mr. Tharp's article. And so I'll link to that below the video. But I want to cover three things, his three main arguments. And the first, and I'd say arguably the most important, is when we're thinking about investment fees, and this will be true whether it's an AUM or some sort of flat fee, as we'll talk about in a minute, should we evaluate how that's going to affect our wealth over time? I think the answer is unequivocally yes, we absolutely should. Now, I agree with Mr. Tharp. We're not going to do that for every expense we have. I would certainly not do that for expenses that I would describe as necessities, right? So I'm not, figuring out the loss in compounding, when we go to the grocery store or we pay our electric bill. And I'm also not doing it for sort of periodic, small, discretionary expenses. So if my wife and I go to the movies, I'm not trying to figure out how much compounding we're going to lose because, we bought a bucket of popcorn, as expensive as that is, by the way. But when it comes to large discretionary expenses, and particularly ongoing discretionary expenses, I think understanding the effects of compounding can help us take what in the moment may seem like a very small, insignificant, purchase decision, and it allows us to understand how that decision, repeated over time, will actually affect our finances. A perfect example, and I mentioned this in my article, is if someone's spending several $100s a month on streaming services, well, those are all discretionary expenses. If they came to me for budgeting help, I would absolutely show them that, hey, if you cut back on some of them, don't get rid of all of them, but if you get rid of some of them, you save $100 or $200 a month or whatever it might be. Here's the wealth that seemingly insignificant decision can build for you over time. I think it's absolutely a wonderful way to understand long-term effects of our day-to-day spending decisions. And when it comes to investment fees, that's absolutely the case. We should certainly be looking at the compounding effects because in the moment, 1% doesn't even seem like that much. I mean, there are cashback credit cards, for goodness sake, that pay more than that. How bad can 1% fee be? On top of that, unlike money we might spend, on our credit card or a debit card, we don't typically see that 1% leaving our account. Advisors take it out directly from the accounts they manage. Yes, it ends up in some transaction report we might get once a quarter, but I'm pretty confident most advisors aren't putting at the top of their statement, hey, you just paid me X dollars, which was 1% of your portfolio, and by the way, here's the compounding effect that's going to have over time. They're just not going to do that. So it's very easy to sort of lose track of it. In fact, if you pay an AUM fee, my question to you would be, do you include that fee in your budget? I'm guessing the answer is no. And so I think looking at the compounding effect of that fee over time is critical. At the end of the day, Mr. Tharp and I are just going to have to agree to disagree. Now, point two he made was, it ignores the value. And in one way, he's absolutely right. We're just looking at the fee side. And of course, financial advisors bring a lot of value to their clients, at least the good ones do, right? Not only in investing managing their investments, but things like Roth conversions. When should you claim Social Security? Maybe a plan to get out of debt and save for a child's education. All of these things are very, very important, and a good financial advisor can help you with all of those things if you want the help. But here's the point. You don't have to pay a percentage of your investments every year for those kinds of services. There are plenty of hourly fee-based advisors and flat fee-based advisors. In fact, I have a page on my website that lists several of them. And by the way, I have no financial relationship with any of them. I'll leave a link to that page below the video. Again, you'll want to do your own due diligence. Don't take the fact that they're on that page as some representation that they're good for you. You want to do your own due diligence. But the point is, there are a lot of alternatives out there to paying an expensive AUM fee. And so, yes, do they provide value? Sure, but you don't have to pay effectively a percentage of your wealth or a good portion of your wealth every year for these kinds of services. Now, that gets us to the third and final point that Mr. Tharp made. You can say, well, wait a minute, Rob, that's fine, but you talk about the benefits of, say, a flat fee arrangement, but you're telling me that Mr. Tharp has crunched the numbers and a flat fee is no better and in some cases worse. Well, yes, but no, that's the answer. So he did do some analysis. What he did was, and this was consistent with what Ramit was doing in his tweet, he said, let's go back in time and let's imagine someone just starting out and they're saving for retirement. And what would happen if they used Facet Wealth's $2,000 plan and he adjusted it for inflation, or their $6,000 plan, he adjusted that for inflation, or a 1% AUM fee. And what he found was that, remember that 1% AUM fee cost about 25% of the nest egg. He found that the 2% plan actually lost 23% of the nest egg, so maybe a little lower, but still pretty bad. And that $6,000 fee ended up taking away, are you ready for this? 70% of the nest egg. Huge numbers and far greater than what the 1% AUM fee took away. So what's the problem? Well, the problem are all the assumptions in those calculations. It's certainly true that if you start from day one and you start saving some money, a $2,000 or $6,000 annual fee is not going to make any sense. It's going to be an absolutely huge number compared to the relatively small dollars you have invested. At the same time, a 1% fee is going to be quite small because it's being multiplied against, $1,000, $10,000, $25,000, let's just say. And so at least initially, it's going to end up being quite small. Now, there are some realities here. Most AUM financial advisors, one, have minimums. They won't accept a client, not all of them, but many of them, unless you've got $100,000, $250,000, $1 million, sometimes more. And if they do, they often have minimum fees that you have to pay. So it's 1% of AUM, or let's say $3,000 or $5,000, whichever is greater. So as a practical matter, this sort of thing often won't work for someone just starting out. But here's the real takeaway. Imagine you've got a big 401k at work, you're going to retire, and you move, say, $1 million portfolio into an IRA, and you're looking for someone to manage it. In that case, a 1% AUM fee will absolutely cost you far, far more than, let's say, a $2,000 flat fee. And by the way, at Facet Wealth, the $2,000 fee and the $6,000 fee get you the exact same investment management. There are differences, of course, to those two tiers, but they have to do more with estate planning and tax planning. You're getting the exact same portfolio, the exact same investment management. And so when you take it in that kind of situation, that $2,000 fee is going to be far, far, far less expensive, both in the moment and compounded over time, than a 1% AUM fee. The point is, as you're looking at any sort of analysis of fees, we've got to be careful to look at the underlying assumptions. The reality is that often those assumptions don't apply to most people. I think that's certainly true in the case of Mr. Tharp's article. They certainly don't apply to me. I suppose they may or may not apply to you, but the reality is, particularly for retirement planning and moving into retirement, a 1% AUM fee is going to have a significant impact on your investment portfolio, your net worth, and ultimately the kind of lifestyle you can live during retirement. Again, the financial planning piece, tax planning piece, even the investment management piece may be very, very important to you. The point here is not that you shouldn't seek out those services. Maybe for you they're very important. I get that. The real question is, should you be paying a 1% AUM fee rather than hourly or project-based or a relatively low flat fee? And I think for most people, most of the time, the answer is no. So there you go. That's my take on it. Again, I'll leave a link to Mr. Tharp's article. And to be clear, he's written a lot on Kitz's blog. He does excellent work. Just this is one where he and I'll just have to agree to disagree. And I'll also include a link to my article as well. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll be happy to help you out any way I can. And until next time, remember, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.